This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, this is the Michael Cutler moment. I am Michael Cutler. This moment is being brought to you by the Glazov gang. I'm here today to talk about an issue that's of great concern to me and should be of great concern to all Americans. John Kerry, the Secretary of State, recently delivered the commencement address at Northeastern University, May of 2016, and he predicted to those students that they were entering what he referred to as a borderless world. The notion that the Secretary of State, a man who has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, enforce the laws of the United States, would make the statement that the world that we live in is borderless, that anybody who believes that we need to erect walls to protect us is somehow dealing in an antiquated concept, gives me more than cause for pause. I spent 30 years of my life as an immigration agent. Half of my career I was over at the Drug Task Force. I spent 4 years with the Unified Intelligence Division of the Drug Enforcement Administration. I've arrested terrorists in my career. Our borders are our first and last line of defense against those who would enter this country and attack us. On 9/11, the ashes from the conflagration at Ground Zero landed on my home and in part contained the remains of my neighbors. What angered me more than anything else was that in May of 1997, May 20th to be precise, I participated in my first of many congressional hearings. The topic of that hearing was how visa fraud and immigration benefit fraud enabled two groups of terrorists or two terrorist attacks to be carried out in 1993. First, a guy by the name of Kansi, a Pakistani citizen, attacked the CIA with an AK-47, killed 2 CIA officers, wounded 3 others, and 1 month later, we had the deadly attack at the World Trade Center. That bombing almost brought that 110-story building down sideways. 6 people were killed, more than 1,000 injured, more than $500 million in damages inflicted on that once iconic landmark of the lower Manhattan skyline. That hearing made it clear that it was vulnerabilities and failures of the visa process, the process that Mr. Kerry bears total responsibility for as Secretary of State, facilitated the entry of those terrorists into our country to practice their jihadist agenda. We had 9/11. And 9/11, again, according to the 9/11 Commission, to which I provided testimony, would not have happened, could not have happened, if the immigration system had worked and if the visa process had been carried out with integrity. And in fact, I want to read a quick quote to you. This is the preface of the 9/11 Commission staff report on terrorist travel. It is perhaps obvious to state that terrorists cannot plan and carry out attacks in the United States if they are unable to enter the country. Yet prior to September 11, while there were efforts to enhance border security, no agency of the United States government thought of border security as the tool in the counterterrorism arsenal. Indeed, even after 19 hijackers demonstrated the relative ease of obtaining U.S. visas and gaining admission into the United States, border security still is not considered a cornerstone of national security policy. We believe, for reasons that we provide in the following pages, that it must be made one. So right there in the preface of an official government report, a report published by the U.S. Government Printing Office, a report prepared by the agents and attorneys who worked with the 9/11 Commission, it was very clear from the outset that it was failures of the process whereby we provide visas to foreign nationals that enabled the terrorists to enter our country and commit the worst terrorist attack ever carried out on the lands of the United States of America. And to put it in perspective, just 19 terrorists barely out of their teens created more carnage on 9/11 than did the entire Japanese Navy at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. So when the Secretary of State, the chief executive of that branch of our government that's supposed to partner with our immigration enforcement program to administer the visa process, that's supposed to keep out aliens who, number one, have dangerous communicable diseases or are suffering from severe mental illness or are otherwise posing a threat to our well-being by being criminals, spies, terrorists, human rights violators, war criminals, or fugitives from justice, to have that person in that job talk about this notion of enforcing our borders as somehow witchcraft leaves me speechless. We live in a perilous world. The European Union, right now, the EU, is looking at ways of tightening up borders that had been taken down when they created the EU. They understand, in the wake of what happened in Brussels, what happened in Paris, the deadly rampages of radical jihadists, that lives have been lost because of a failure to be able to secure borders. We're looking at this massive flow of supposed refugees out of Syria. I say supposed because it has been determined by the FBI. James Comey, the head of the FBI, and testifying before Congress, said, we can't vet these people. Michael Steinbach, his assistant director for counterterrorism at the FBI, made the same statement. They described Syria as a failed state, saying that there's no way to vet these people. So if you can't vet them, and we don't know whether they're even citizens of Syria, and they're flooding across Europe, and now they're headed this way in the administration against the wishes of the American people. Talk about a government that's supposed to govern by the consent of the people. Ignoring the American people, ignoring the concerns, ignoring the safety issues, ignoring the national security issues, even as it becomes ever more difficult to board an airplane in the United States with all that goes on with the TSA. Once aliens enter the United States, nothing is done to look for them. If you want to consider that visa process and that inspections process conducted at ports of entry, we have 328 ports of entry. I'm intimately familiar with the process. I spent the first 4 years of my career with the old INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, as an inspector at Kennedy Airport. So we know that at least 500,000 aliens who enter each year are supposed to leave within a definite period, get lost, disappear. That's a huge problem. We now have over 1.2 million foreign students studying in the United States. And I still cannot forget the day that I was called to testify before the House of Representatives, before the House Judiciary Committee, Subcommittee on Immigration, when to everyone's horror it was discovered that two dead terrorists, Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shehi, two of the leaders of the terror attack of 9/11, had been granted authorization to attend flight school 6 months after terrorist attacks. You should watch that video. It's still on C-SPAN. The indignation, the anger of the members of Congress promising that this kind of a screw-up would never happen again. Well, let me tell you, if you watch that hearing and you look at what this administration has done since it has come into office, not a single promise made at that hearing has been kept. If anything, we've gone in the exact opposite direction. The idea that this administration now has a Secretary of State marching lockstep with DHS, the Department of Homeland Surrender, as I call it, releasing criminal aliens into communities, killing people, committing serious crimes. There was just a hearing conducted on April the 19th by the House Immigration Subcommittee. Lamar Smith, who used to chair the House Judiciary Committee, used to chair the House Immigration Subcommittee, released the information, and disturbingly, that in just 3 years, more than 100,000 criminal aliens were released into communities by this administration. That's the follow-on to what happens when aliens enter the United States illegally, either by running the borders or violating the terms of their visas. So here's the real bottom line. If you have administrators and executives in charge of programs that deal with national security who absolutely, positively reject the notion that America not only has the right, but the imperative, the demand to secure its borders, make certain that there's true integrity to the process, they apparently are more than willing to put American lives at risk. And this is something that is totally unacceptable. In point of fact, since 9/11, there have been other terrorist attacks, most recently San Bernardino. And again, the way that that attack was carried out, this young woman came into the United States on a K-1 visa. That K-1 visa was issued to her by John Kerry's State Department. And what was the result? The second largest casualty count in U.S. history, the greatest casualty count since the attacks of 9/11. And this just happened. So time and again, we're seeing that this isn't just some scary notion someone's come up with. Oh, this might happen. And people say, oh, that's silly. No, it's not silly. We have the dead bodies, unfortunately, to prove it. Kerry spent quite a bit of his time at that commencement address making political statements, which seem to be in very poor taste, alleging that if you want to secure your borders somehow, this is about bigotry, which it's not. The immigration laws are completely blind about race, religion, ethnicity. It's totally about keeping out those people who pose a threat to our well-being. He talked about global poverty while ignoring America's poverty problem. The fact that 1 in 4 American children now live below the poverty line. That wages aren't just stagnating, but in decline. Why are they in decline? We admit more lawful working foreign nationals with those visas that Mr. Kerry issues so that they can work in the United States, even as Americans are losing their jobs to foreign workers. You have to really wonder how in the world this guy goes to sleep at night. If this was a normal job, the one that you or I would have in this day and age, I would recommend that he be fired. This is a man who not only refuses to live up to his responsibilities, but is actually working against the best interests of our country by calling for an abdication of his responsibilities. If a doctor did the same thing, he would say, well, since nobody lives forever, why bother curing anybody? Since at the end of the day or at the end of whatever period of time, nobody lives forever. Yes, people will get past our borders, and I've made that point. We're a country of 50 border states, and that's where immigration enforcement needs to come in. We do nothing once they come here as long as they get lost in the shuffle. So think about this two-punch that we're being handed. Kerry says, let's let the world in, and then the immigration people are telling us that once they're here, no matter how they get here, they're entitled to a pathway to citizenship. At what point does our government represent the best interests of America and Americans? That's the question that I would like to pose to John Kerry. I'd like to pose it to his boss, President Obama, who's certainly on board with Mr. Kerry, because I don't believe he's making those statements in a vacuum. I want to thank you for spending this time with me, and I also want to urge you to support the Glazov gang at jamieglazov.com and make certain to subscribe to his YouTube channel. Thank you again. Speak to you soon.